The next leg of our UK journey took us by train to York. Our Airbnb was close to the station in the historic Micklegate district. Once we arrived, we couldn't have been happier with the location and the thoughtful goodies left by our host.
Perfect. All right. Lovely little living room. Plenty of space. My goodness, how lovely. Then we come back to a very lovely bedroom. See that we're above a cafe, and there's the little patio for the cafe down below.
We set out to explore our neighborhood, stopping in first at the quiet medieval Holy Trinity Church. The earliest form of the church is believed to have been founded in Roman times, but was dedicated as a Benedictine monastery in 1089. There's a marvelous display about Benedictine life, which illustrates how the monks kept one foot in the cloister and one in the outside world, founding schools, caring for the sick in their hospitals, building things like watermills and windmills to improve their farms, and offering hospitality to strangers. Next, we made our way to the York Museum Gardens, which were in full bloom on this first day of May. The gardens also feature the statuesque ruins of St. Mary's Abbey, which will be a continuing theme in our trip through Yorkshire. Now on to one of the most well-known features of York, the longest and most intact medieval city walls of any town in England. Over the couple of days we were there, we walked most of the 3.4-kilometer-long sections of wall, providing a unique view of the city, including the famous York Minster. We continued our walkabout on this beautiful day, popping into shops and exploring the medieval street known as the Shambles, finally making our way to a special stop for dinner at Ye Old Star Inn. Our dear friend Denise and her family lived in York from 1979 to 80, and this inn was a pub they frequented and still holds a special place in their memories. We had a delicious meal and the atmosphere was great. On day 2 in York, we had a little walk along the River Ouse before heading to the meeting place for our Mountain Goat small group tour through the beautiful Yorkshire moors and up to the coastal town of Whitby.
For over 1,000 years, until 1974, the government decided to distribute Yorkshire into 4 smaller counties for admin purposes. North, east, south and west. Robert Thompson lived in Kilburn, and he was known as Mousy Thompson.
Our first stop, the Byland Abbey ruins, standing formidably against the blue skies of spring. This abbey was founded by an order of French monks from Normandy, with construction on the living quarters beginning in the late 1150s. It's always remarkable to realize how these ancient structures took decades to complete, with many of the builders not living to see the final result. Even as ruins, Byland Abbey was a moving sight. We had a brief stop for refreshment in the charming village of Helmsley. Next, we had a look at a small medieval church whose most stunning feature was the 800-year-old yew tree in the churchyard.
Way beyond is the Victorian time. Put that on. The bell tower.
That's on the brewery site there. It says Kingston, the Yorkshire brand is Kingston, over at Massive and Lady Deals. There's a popular family that fell out, the youngest son.
Our drive through the North Yorkshire Moors National Park was stunning, but we were not to be limited by one form of transportation. We and our 8 fellow passengers disembarked our van at Goathland Station and boarded a steam train for the remainder of the trip to Whitby. Goathland may be recognized by Harry Potter fans as the one used in the films for Hogsmeade Station. Halfway to Whitby, we switched trains, and now we had the fun of sitting in a compartment for the rest of the way. Sadly, there was no trolley witch coming around with licorice wands or chocolate frogs for us. On to Whitby Abbey, high atop the cliffs overlooking the sea. These atmospheric Gothic ruins inspired Bram Stoker to write his Dracula story. The overcast skies and chill in the air were definitely adding to the spooky vibe. We had had a ride to the top, but now we walked down the 100 steps into town in search of fish and chips for lunch. We highly recommend Trenchers as the place to go. Back across the foggy moors and eventually into clear skies as we return to York, the minster glowing in the late day sun. On day 3, we set out for more exploring around the city of York. We started with a bus ride to the suburban neighborhood where our friend Denise and her family lived during their year there. We found their house, currently under renovation, as well as the original school building where Denise's father Burl taught high school chemistry. We went back to the museum gardens for another look at the spring blooms before heading to the other side of town and another part of the city wall to walk. Just as we got there, it started to rain, but we were prepared and didn't let a little spring shower stop us. Our next stop was the York Minster, where we took a tour with a knowledgeable and friendly guide, time well spent, as we learned many interesting points of history and architecture. After our tour of the Minster, we had one more thing on our checklist, which has become a bit of a luxury habit for us now. High tea, this time at Betty's of York. It was delightful as always, and we were serenaded by a pianist playing an interesting mix of Frank Sinatra and Elton John. After tea, we headed back to our place for a quiet evening before our early train the next morning. The next morning, we walked through Micklegate Bar and said goodbye to York, boarding the train to London to meet up with Chloe for one more afternoon together before heading home. At her suggestion, we went out to Richmond to see the filming sites for Ted Lasso, a family favorite. Next, we headed to Notting Hill for a photo op at the bookshop and happened onto the bustling Portobello Market. A delicious Mediterranean dinner rounded out the day before Carl and I checked into the tiniest hotel room we'd ever seen, dubbed the room under the stairs a la Harry Potter. We said our goodbyes for now to Chloe, who hopped on the train back to Brighton. Repacked and ready to head home, we reminisced about all the great times we had in England as the Heathrow Express delivered us to the airport and the long journey home to Aiken.
What are you doing? Oh, that. No, get me out of here. I'm not going to be...